Hello, everyone, and welcome to Functional Fertility, the podcast designed to demystify your hormones, up-level your lifestyle, and supercharge your fertility potential. I'm your host, Dr. Kalea Wattles, and today's episode is dedicated to at-home hormone testing, featuring our brilliant guest, Dr. Amy Divaraniya. Amy is a biomedical scientist with a PhD in genetics and genomics. Through her own challenging journey trying to get pregnant and being misdiagnosed with PCOS, she founded Oova, the leading women's health platform known for its physician-backed fertility monitoring. It's such a treat to have her with us today. Welcome to the show, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, you and I have been connecting maybe for the last 5 years or so, we discovered.
Yeah.
So I've loved to see this evolution of Oova, and at-home hormone testing is one of the most common questions in my DMs, with my one-to-one patients, with my online program. So what a time to be alive that this type of technology is even available, right?
I mean, don't you think it's about time?
It's about time. That's exactly right.
I think it's just really sad that women have considered or have settled. I shouldn't even say considered, but settled with the fact that the blinking smiley face is good enough. And I'm really honored to be part of that cycle or that movement to retire that blinking smiley face. I believe women deserve numbers, they deserve objective information, so they can have an actual conversation with you instead of telling you I got a smiley face today or a blank circle.
That's right. We love data, and it's, as a clinician, it's so helpful for me to see how someone's cycle is behaving over the course of an entire month, or maybe even longer if we have irregular cycles, which we're going to talk about. But I think it might be helpful for people who maybe they're used to doing just a simple OPK that tests luteinizing hormone. But now we have so many more options, and we can look at so many more hormones. Will you tell us what type of hormones we can measure with at-home hormone testing like Oova?
Yeah, sure. So our test right now measures luteinizing hormone, progesterone, and estrogen. So we measure the metabolites in the urine. So for progesterone, it's PDG. For estrogen, we're looking at E3G. We know that these metabolites in the urine are really well correlated in blood. So it's kind of a one-to-one that we're able to draw between the urine testing and the blood testing. The huge value of Oova is being able to measure these hormones over time, right? When you go in for blood work, you're often getting a snapshot look of what your health is and what is going on with your system that day. But we're not robots and we're not stagnant. So there's a lot of fluctuations that happen on a daily basis and even throughout a single day. So being able to see how these hormones fluctuate and what the trends are over time is really the value that we bring with our platform.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes when patients come to me and they've already seen other providers and they've asked, maybe another doc if they'll do hormone testing, and they'll say, there's no point. It's just a snapshot in time, thinking about serum testing, right? And to a certain extent, that is true. I still think that there's a lot of value in testing hormones, but this is where the at-home hormone testing comes into play, because just like you said, it's not a snapshot in time. It's really looking at how those hormones are behaving over a period of time, and that's really, really valuable. I had a listener write in a question, and I love to address these, and I thought you'd be the perfect person to ask. She said, should I use the at-home hormone test in conjunction with some of the other methods I might be using, like tracking my basal body temperature or tracking my cervical mucus? Do I just need the hormones, or should I collect multiple data points?
So I'm a data scientist by training, as you mentioned earlier. So to me, the more data you have, the better, right? Now, hormone testing is great. Measuring basal body temperature, cervical mucus, that's all great too. Just keep in mind that basal body temperature and cervical mucus are basically a symptom of how your hormones are behaving. And if your hormones are aligned, like looking at all three of those pieces can give you such a great comprehensive picture of what's going on with your cycle and where you are. Just one, I mean, I think the hormone testing is great because you're really getting to the root of what's going on. But like looking at just cervical mucus or just basal body temperature is giving you a piece of the puzzle.
I agree. And I love how you said some of these other physical signs and symptoms, they are secondary to these hormonal changes. And so sometimes I'll have patients and they're really confused about their cervical mucus. Like, is this the egg white consistency? Is it something else? And I'll say, okay, well, look at how your hormones are behaving. And that can help you to set some expectations for what you should be seeing at this point in your cycle. And I think it can give us a little bit more confidence or peace of mind that our interpretation is actually correct.
100%. I mean, I think a lot of women are lost because they feel like they should have this information, they should know it. No, you should. Yes, in theory, you should, but the fact that you don't doesn't mean that you're less of a woman or you're not smart. We're not taught this information. I had to become my own hormone expert when I was trying to get pregnant, and I was pre-med. I have a PhD, I have a master's. I was never taught this information. I had to literally teach it to myself. So the fact that women don't understand the difference between egg white, cervical fluid, you shouldn't ding yourself for it. You need to understand what this is. Because I'm sure until you were trying to get pregnant, you probably were like, what is this? Like, I'm gross.
Yeah. I've said this on the show before that what you just said, no one teaches us about this. We didn't learn it in school. It's certainly no one talked about this in sex ed. My mom certainly didn't talk to me about this. I know a lot of people's mother did not mention this. She probably wasn't tracking her cervical mucus. Even our friend groups, I think now there's a shift and we are talking about it more and more with our friends. But when I was trying to conceive my first child 10 years ago, none of my friends knew about this. It wasn't coming up in the group chat, certainly. So now we're taking charge. We are empowered with knowledge. And with that, I think some additional questions come up because if we have had hormone testing before, we probably heard from our doc, let's go in on cycle day 3. Let's go in a week after ovulation. That might actually be advanced. Someone who knows when to test serum levels on which day. But with this type of monitoring, people will often ask me, you touched on this a little bit, but how do the values detected on an at-home device like Oova compared to levels that we might see in the blood with serum testing?
So I can't speak to every test that's on the market. I can speak to the work that we've done with Oova. That's always going to be the question, right? Like, how well does this correlate with blood? Well, we picked these biomarkers specifically because we know that they're well correlated in blood and urine. There's a ton of biomarkers that you can measure. When you do a blood panel, you're going to see a whole slew of hormones that are being tracked. But there's a reason there may not be a urine test and why Oova hasn't prioritized those because they're not well correlated in blood. In urine. AMH is a perfect example. It's not well correlated in blood and urine, so we don't have an AMH test. But with Oova, there's ample literature out there outside of Oova's platform that showcase that these 3 biomarkers that we're looking at in urine are correlated with blood. We've done our own diligence to ensure that, well, one, are we accurately measuring the hormones in the urine sample? If you know how much hormone is present in that sample. And then 2, we've done a lot of work actually doing our own correlation with blood and urine with the Oova test. And it's been a remarkable correlation that we've seen.
Wow. So I'm thinking about all the different applications of at-home hormone testing. Can we use this technology, let's say for someone who's preparing for an IVF cycle and they're watching their hormones to make sure that their endometrium is thickening and that they're getting ready for ovulation? Can we apply it in that setting?
So if you're looking at IVF, I would tell you, if you're going through an IVF cycle, I would tell you not to use Oova for that in today's state, because the maximum that Oova's test can measure for estrogen is 500 picograms per ml. And if you're going through an IVF cycle, you are getting medications to actually increase your estrogen substantially higher than that level. So Oova's test is not going to be reliable in that setting where you're getting medications. Now, if you're using something like Clomid or Letrozole, we would work for you there because you can actually indicate whether the medications are working properly. They should be inducing ovulation, and you can detect that with Oova's test. If you're going through an IUI or a low stim cycle or natural frozen embryo transfer, all of that Oova is really good for.
Okay, that's so helpful. And thinking about these different hormonal patterns, I think a lot of patients turn to hormone testing because they have irregular cycles and they're just trying to figure it out. How can at-home hormone monitoring help those patients that they don't even know when they're ovulating? Maybe it's been 3 months since their last period and it just seems like there's so much uncertainty. They don't know how to track. How can we get started and figure out what's going on?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like you want to lift the cover of,
Yeah.
lift the hood of this car, right? Like, what is going on under here? Why aren't you turning on? And that's where the hormone levels are really critical because at least we can understand, are you having an extended follicular phase or a super long luteal phase? You will see certain trends in those hormones to indicate where you are in your cycle. Now, it may not be predicted to say, okay, based on these 4 days of data, your period is probably coming in the next 3 weeks. We can't do that. That there's a model for that today. But we can shed light on where you are in your cycle. Did you ovulate or not? Was there an egg released? Was like, are you seeing your estrogen and progesterone levels completely out of whack? Like, is there some imbalance happening here? Is your LH incredibly elevated? Are there signs of other reproductive disorders that may explain some of these delays? It starts to uncover questions that can actually be addressed, but when you have data to kind of lean on.
Mm-hmm. And on that note, I know that there's patients who are using Oova to track their hormones, and then there's the practitioners on the other side who are kind of attached to these patients. How have you observed that having the data is improving the line of communication between patients and practitioners and allowing them to kind of speak the same language?
So I'll turn the question to you for a second. How many of your patients are sending you screenshots of apps or images of ovulation strips?
Most of them.
Okay. And how meaningful is that just looking at that snapshot, like
Oh my
result?
gosh, it's so incredibly meaningful and it allows me to make such educated recommendations about what's going on. Particularly for me, it's I'm often um monitoring my progesterone that I'm giving in the luteal phase and just making sure that our progesterone isn't dropping off really quick. And so having that progesterone all through the luteal phase, not just a one-time snapshot, is invaluable to me.
Right. So now what we have on our side is the patient is using her Uva at home. She would select you as a provider in our app. And then you as her provider can actually log into your HIPAA compliant Uva dashboard and view your patient's data in real time and be able to see those hormone trends. So you can actually see that the progesterone is staying elevated throughout the luteal phase. And best, you'll know she's in her luteal phase because you can see that she ovulated. So you're able to track the entire cycle. Now, what's happening though is not only are you as the clinician able to see the data, of course, you're trained in looking at hormone data, you know the patterns that you should be seeking. Typically, a user doesn't know them. So Uva is really prioritizing education on the front end to let the woman know, like, what is her hormone level? How has this changed from yesterday? What does that trend look like? And then in context, am I in my follicular phase, luteal phase, post ovulation? What is this? So we do contextualize it. So now when she's coming to you, she's not coming to you devastated, lost, and confused. She's coming to you with really, I don't want to say challenging questions, but informed questions.
And that's what I hope for my patients is that they can come to me with questions that are relevant to their own unique body so that we can really dive in. And I've heard people say this before that we all change what we can measure. So having that data is incredibly motivating. And I think it helps us anchor into our treatment plan because we know we're not just throwing interventions and hoping for the best. We have a clear marker that we're trying to shift and we can track that over time. And I think that's so powerful.
Mhm. Yeah. And then we're not like removing the other features that you're all very used to monitoring, like cervical mucus, BBT are very important to you. We're also allowing patients to track their symptoms in the app. So you as her provider can actually view the symptom data on top of the hormone data and see how all of that correlates.
We always say you have to marry labs to symptoms or they are not as meaningful. So we want to know how those hormones are showing up in your human experience as well. And I think that that's a really important feature and an important point. Are there what I might call hormone imbalance patterns that can go undetected? Even things, you mentioned a little bit PCOS or maybe hypothalamic amenorrhea. Maybe there's some others I'm not even thinking about. Are there patterns that might go undetected that at-home hormone testing can help to shine a light on?
Of course. Because why is it going undetected?
Hmm.
There's no way to collect that information today except to go into the clinic every day for blood work. And most women aren't able to do that. Most clinics aren't able to satisfy that, and insurance is definitely not covering that. So we're giving you kind of a look into a data set that just wasn't accessible before. And we're actually opening up a lot of opportunity for you as a provider to truly treat the root cause of a lot of your patients' discomfort and issues.
Mhm. Thinking about PCOS specifically, one of the complaints I hear, because for a long time, before we had access to more advanced at-home hormone testing, I just loved a simple OPK, like the kind you order off Amazon. I know that that's a controversial hot take, but I've always loved them. But my patients with PCOS will always say, I'm getting a positive every day because we see this chronic elevation in LH, and it's so frustrating and it's not helpful at all. Does that same pattern happen with a test like Oova, and we just kind of watch the other hormones, or is there some benefit that's outside of just the regular OPK?
Yeah, so we obviously will see the elevated LH because it's there, right? The LH levels are elevated, so that's going to show up. But the beauty of our platform is that there is a whole machine learning algorithm on the back end that's actually getting smarter with every piece of information collected. So with like, let's say I have PCOS, I start using Oova today, I might see elevated LH. So yes, cycle one, it may be a little off, telling me like I'm in high peak fertility, like it's wrong because it's just elevated. But what is happening is the LH is going to continue to go up, and I will have a peak if I ovulate. So the algorithm will learn that this baseline is actually higher than normal, and will set that as your new baseline. So now we're not looking for an absolute value or a threshold for you to surpass in order to get a positive result. We're waiting for a certain differential on a day-to-day basis between our daily level and your baseline to tell you where you are in your cycle.
Wow, that's so much more helpful than just the line on the strip and is it
Yeah,
positive or not? And then hopefully we will get a peak, and hopefully will ovulate and we'll see that PDG start to rise, right? And so
exactly.
that's an added benefit that I think is very helpful. Another question for you that a lot of my patients with PCOS will ask me when I want to do some of this testing is like, okay, well, am I going to just have to buy a million wands then because I'm testing for so long? And usually my answer is yeah. I mean, you do need a lot of wands if you have to test over time. Is there some different advice I should be giving, or is that just it is what it is? You have to test over time.
I mean, that yes, you want to test over time. You want that data, but I do think, and we see it like our users are very smart, right? Like I'm not in this to make a quick dollar. I'm here to support women, and women are incredibly smart. They figure
Yes.
out ways to optimize everything. So once you get a handle of your cycle, like maybe the first 1, 2 cycles, you do want to test every day. You really want to make sure that you're understanding when you're ovulating. It depends on your goal. Do I care more about the luteal phase? Do I care more about ovulation? Like, do I have a concern in the beginning of my cycle? Let's say you're caring about ovulation. Once you learn what your pattern is, you don't need to necessarily test every day. You can start timing it and ensure that you're making the most out of the kits that you have. I am the worst salesperson for my company because I always tell women how to hack our own system because they're going to do it anyway. So why not support them to do it? Um, I don't think they need to test. Like once you learn what's going on with your body, you don't need to buy hundreds and thousands of wands or cartridges from us. You just need to get the data for what is meaningful for you. And there's a lot of ways to do that.
Hmm. I wanted to dive into your own personal experience a little bit because Um, we heard in your bio that you were misdiagnosed with PCOS, and I have a lot of patients who come to me and they're like, "Okay, I've received this PCOS diagnosis, but I'm not really sure about it, and I just want a second pair of eyes on this." Will you tell us a little bit about that experience and what that means?
Yeah, sure. I was really surprised that when I started sharing the story that people were actually like, that happened to me too. And it wasn't like a one-off thing that happened to me, which is so scary to think about. Um, but what happened with me is when I started having my period, it was always irregular. So since my first, I've always had an irregular cycle. And like who do you go to when you have your period and questions about this? You go to your mom. My mom wasn't concerned at the time, so I let it go. Like, whatever, I don't have it every month. That's one less thing I could deal with, right? Um, But then I went to college and my major was pre-med. And so the last semester, I lived in the library, I ate garbage, getting ready for finals. So when I graduated, I go to my mom, or like I come home, my mom's like, let's take you to an OB and get your period checked out because you're gonna have trouble getting pregnant later if we don't get this under check. And so I was like, fine, whatever. I'm like 22 years old. I don't really care about having a baby right now, but fine, let's get this checked. I walked into the doctor's office. They took one look at me and was like, you have PCOS. And why did they say that? I had just graduated undergrad and was in the library for the past month. So I hadn't had time to get my eyebrows done. And I'm Indian, so I have dark facial hair. I had gained a little bit of weight eating garbage, and I had some adult acne from eating garbage for a month. And they literally just took that look at me and was like, we're like, you have PCOS. Put me on metformin, put me on birth control pills. I obediently took it, didn't ask any questions. Like, what questions would I have to ask? I'm trusting this doctor, right? Kalea, I'm gonna pause for a second. My computer's about to die, so let me just plug this in.
Go get your charger.
Sorry. I should have done that. I think it's right here. But let's see, where was I? So I immediately took the medications and I started taking them. I'm a very positive, happy-go-lucky person. All of a sudden, I became depressed. I didn't want to get out of bed. I felt like garbage every single day. And the worst part was I was also becoming anemic because I started bleeding uncontrollably with the birth control pills they were giving me. And so they swapped those pills several times. Nothing suited me. And so this went on for about 3 years. And then I went to a new OB, and during my intake form, I said I have PCOS, I'm on all these meds. She had taken the time to run a blood panel on me before I came in for my first visit. And so I think at the time she was like, go to LabCorp, get a blood draw, and then I'll have all the data when you come in. And it was such a weird experience because I do my intake, go into the room, and she's on her like clipboard, like they were still writing at the time. And she goes, why do you think you have PCOS? You don't have PCOS, you're fine. Get off all these things. And said it so flippantly. Where I'm like for the past 3 years, I've been dealing with this. And why don't you think I have PCOS? Oh, your hormones are totally normal. You just have an irregular cycle. And moved on to the next topic. So I was like, okay, this is great. And the amount of, like, I walked out of that office in such a daze because it kind of shook up what you consider to be true. You don't really question your doctor, or I never thought to question my doctor. And now all of a sudden, I didn't trust them at all. It was a really scary and weird thing to walk away with.
My heart aches because, like you said, I know this isn't a unique experience, unfortunately. And this is one reason why I tell my patients, question me always. If I say anything to you and you're not sure where I'm going, or you don't understand my recommendation, question me. Because if I can't explain it, I shouldn't be doing it. And I think that we're getting more savvy. I mean, like you said, women are so smart and we're getting so savvy. But it's hard to question someone who is a professional, and they went to med school and they're this doctor, and it's so hard to ask those questions. And I can see now from your origin story why it was your soul work to start Oova and to give women the information that they deserve.
Yeah, I mean, that whole experience left, like I said, such a mistrust for the community, or for the medical community when it came to my fertility and reproductive health, that when we started trying to have a baby, even before we had trouble, my husband and I agreed we weren't going to go down the invasive route. And my sole point to him was, I don't want a doctor to tell me when and how I can get pregnant. If my body doesn't do it on its own, it's just not meant to be. And he was okay with that. But the amount of trauma that one experience left me with to make such a strong statement, I think really resonated with him too, because he's like, oh, okay, like there's no budging on this.
So when you started doing your own testing and looking into your own hormones, were you surprised by your results?
Oh my gosh, yes. So I didn't have Oova when I was trying to get pregnant. I developed Oova because I couldn't get pregnant, right? And that was kind of where the idea stemmed from. But once Oova was available, well, I guess I'll go back a second. When I was trying to get pregnant, um, I barely got positives on OPKs. Like I think out of the 18 months it took me to conceive, there was only 5 months that I got a smiley face, and none of them were ever blinking, right? And I was like, but I'm having a period, not necessarily 18 periods in 18 months, but I was having a period. And I was like, there's no way I'm not ovulating this frequently. And so when I used my own product, I learned that my LH surge is just on the lower side. And I was just not hitting those thresholds that the tests were designed for. And Uva very quickly learned what my differential was. And now it works great for me. I ovulate pretty frequently.
I am so glad you said this because I keep meaning to like do a deep PubMed dive on this, but the more patients I use at-home hormone monitoring with, I see that sometimes people have a really high LH surge, but others have a really small surge, but
Yeah.
they're definitely still ovulatory. And so, I have this online fertility program and we have a closed community and the participants will post screenshots of their cycle charts. And like sometimes we see this teeny little LH, but then a big PDG. And
Yeah.
it's really made me understand that everybody really does have a different threshold that will trigger ovulation. And it's been so insightful. That's maybe been my biggest takeaway from watching others use at home hormone testing.
Well, it goes back to the fact that we're not robots. And I think we're all striving to have that perfect textbook curve, and that's just not reality, right? Like, and it's amazing to me that when we look at the UVA data, the new things that we're finding that just were never reported. I mean, when you look at a textbook hormone chart, you don't see progesterone activity in the follicular phase, right? We released, we presented a paper last ASRM where we showed that progesterone activity in the follicular phase is actually indicative of whether you're going to have an ovulatory or anovulatory cycle, depending on when it happens. It was,
Oh.
and it happened across a majority of our users that we saw progesterone rise happen. And if it was closer to your LH surge, you are more likely to have an ovulatory cycle or release an egg than if the progesterone rise or blip happened earlier in the follicular phase.
Ooh, so
But
interesting.
but no one talks about that. So when
No.
you see progesterone activity in the follicular phase, the first questions we were getting were like, something's wrong with Uva. There shouldn't be progesterone activity here. And I'm going like, well, my knowledge is on, yeah, there should be progesterone activity in the follicular phase. Why is that happening? And then after a lot of research, no, there actually is progesterone there. We don't know what the source is yet, but there is progesterone in the follicular phase. And there seems to be a role when it comes to determining ovulation.
Okay, so I'll be rethinking all of the advice of when I say you only make progesterone after you ovulate. So you should only have progesterone in the luteal phase. This is good. This is why we stay on top of the research and watch how things are evolving. So I will be keeping my eye on that. Thank you for continuing to let us know these patterns you're observing. Another one that has come up for me that it wasn't really on my radar before I started looking at all these charts is a lot of my patients are getting just a teeny little LH surge right before their period starts. And I
Ah,
never was really aware of that before, but now I'm seeing it happen in a lot of people. I've seen it happen in myself. And I think maybe I didn't notice it because sometimes we only do, maybe 5 or 6 days or so after
yeah.
ovulation and then we quit testing because we're good. We ovulated. But that's so cool. My only point is it's so cool to watch how these hormones are behaving.
Yeah, they're dynamic, right? And you think about like how the human body is designed, right? Like it's kind of a bag of finite players. Now, these finite players play a role in multiple processes. It's not like LH and estrogen and progesterone have one role in the human body. They play a role in a lot of things. So to see that little blip of LH right before a period, there's something that's causing it, but no one ever talks about these things because it doesn't paint a beautiful picture. It's not clean, but we're not clean. We're messy, and we should embrace that.
Embrace the messiness. That's gonna be
Yeah.
our new motto. Um, when I'm using the Oova, I noticed that so you do your hormone test and then you're asked to catalog your mood as well. Will you just tell us a little bit about why that was selected as kind of one of the key pieces of information to collect to correlate with your hormones?
Oh my gosh, there's so many reasons for it. So one of our goals at Oova is to kind of myth bust a lot of the assumptions that are out there about women's health. And when you're trying to get pregnant, or even when you're going through a transition like perimenopause, one of the pieces of advice that women are often given is just relax, right? Like there might be something there, but there might also not be. So when we're asking, there's certain things that we've kind of put as default in the app for people to track. You can always go in and like modify what you want to track. But what we're trying to really get at is stress and is happiness, is sadness, are those actually one, are they being influenced by hormone levels? And then two, are we seeing patterns in mood swings associated with the way that the hormones are actually trending and where you are in your cycle?
It's been very interesting for me to watch my own hormones and my own mood. And I think that is a, a lovely addition so that we can all kind of make these connecting points or not. It's
Right,
okay if we're just stressed and having a bad day and our hormones are perfect. Like that's going to
right.
happen too. And how valuable. So we're not like, oh, I'm just hormonal. No, you're having a bad day, which is allowed. Um, Amy, before we part ways today, I have to return to your personal story because it had a happy ending. You had
Yes.
your baby. Will you just
Um,
talk us through that a little bit?
yeah, so yes, I conceived my little boy who is now 5 years old. He is amazing. I will say that I mentioned it took me 18 months to conceive him, and it's it's a really weird like a place you find yourself when you go through an infertility journey because number one, like you start the journey going, I am meant to be a mom. Then you go on this like horrific and devastating, incredibly dark journey where you feel like everything is failing you and you are terrified to take a pregnancy test. And every day is kind of a horror story for you over and over again. And then you get a positive test. And I'll tell you right now, I felt like the symptoms I was feeling were more attuned with having like stomach cancer than being pregnant. I thought that my chances of being pregnant were so slim. It has to be something else. And throughout my entire pregnancy, I was in complete disbelief that I was actually pregnant and really didn't take the time to enjoy those 9 months. I was living in fear the entire time because I thought that this could be taken away from me at any moment. It happened to me month after month with those negative pregnancy tests. I was so positive that it was going to be positive to only for it to be snatched away. Like, nope, it's negative. So I honestly did not accept that I was having a baby until the week before he was due. Thank God he was a week late. Um, and then when I had him, it it was the happiest period of my life for sure, was the biggest driver for me to build this company and is a constant reminder of why we keep going. But it also left this scar on me where I am so terrified to even try to have a second child because I don't think I could go through that heartbreak again. Even though I have a tool, I've built a tool to help me get there. It's something that's so much deeper to have to overcome. And it's just sad that women and families have to go through that.
Yeah, I so honor that feeling, and I know that my patients who have had a history of infertility or pregnancy loss, it is like this wound, and it doesn't go away. It's kind of sticks around or it comes up. Maybe it is less open at times, but then something will happen and it will become very open and it just doesn't fade away like we would maybe think it does. And I can see how the work that you're doing at Uva that maybe shortens that time frame for people or makes that time when they're trying to conceive less scary and less discouraging, it's kind of protective against that wound that you have. And I can so see how your heart is invested in this work.
Thank you. That's a beautiful way to to phrase it, because that's exactly what it is. If I can help a woman not feel lost for even one day, that's a success to me.
That's a huge success. And on that note, what are your dreams for the future at Oova?
That. So it's a really fun question to ask because I feel like we're pioneering something really unique here. We all know that women's health hasn't been given the priority that it deserves. I mean, I don't know how much more proof you need for 51% of the population, yet you don't get the attention it deserves. But what I'm excited about is that, well, one, the conversation around women's health is actually happening now. We are getting attention. But I'm excited about the way that Uva is approaching that conversation and having a voice in the discussion. We're not just saying like, yes, we need to put emphasis on women's health. We're saying, yes, we need to do that, but we need to do it with objective data and science. So we started with fertility. We quickly scaled into perimenopause, and we really want to address every phase of a woman's life by helping her understand her hormonal health through each transition. Because a phase isn't made up of what my goal is. Like today I wake up, I want to have a baby. Now I'm in this phase of life. No, it's really dictated by your hormones and they fluctuate through every phase. So if we can understand that, we can navigate a woman through life from first period to last and beyond. And to me, that's the exciting piece.
That's so aligned with how I approach preconception care in general. I say, this is so you can get pregnant easily, you can have a healthy and safe pregnancy, a smooth postpartum, but then you can reduce risk for chronic disease 20 years down the road. I mean, this is really about longevity and resiliency in our health. So we're very aligned. And Amy, thank you so much for sharing these insights. It's just been such a pleasure to chat with you. And I so appreciate our listeners who choose us as a trusted source of information, to our show's producer, Paola Martini, for making this dream of a podcast come true. Amy, just amazing to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's great to meet you again.
Did you love this episode and want to hear more? Head over to drkaleawattles.com/podcast, where you can find more episodes on all things fertility.